and welcome back to another episode of the IGNITEU New York podcast powered by NYSTEC. I'm your host, Shay Brown, and today we have an incredible guest, Ryan Silva, Executive Director of New York State Economic Development Council. Ryan, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, would you give us a little bit of an intro for yourself for our audience here?
Sure. Well, I won't repeat my name because you already said my name. I serve as Executive Director for the New York State Economic Development Council. I've been in that role since 2017. The New York State EDC is the state's Economic Development Membership Association. We focus on advocacy, education, policy development. We also do industry attraction work to help bring new businesses and new investment into New York State. We have members from Western New York and Buffalo all the way out to the eastern tip of Long Island and everywhere in between. And our goal is to ultimately advocate for policies that advance economic development, create opportunities for economic growth across New York State.
Within that, what is it that you do in your role specifically?
Well, with a staff of 3, it's a little bit of everything. There are days when I'm checking the mail, and there are days when I'm meeting with legislators to talk about bills that we support or we may oppose. We do white papers and research on different economic industries that are either advancing or growing, and how do we create policies out of that that will help drive more growth in the industries that we need to be focusing on here in New York State, amongst many other things.
It's never ending when you're an office of 3, isn't that true?
Absolutely. When you're a small staff, you tend to work on a little bit of everything. That last line in everybody's job description of other duties as assigned applies quite a bit when you're a small non-for-profit association, but it also allows us to interact with our members directly and have access to them, and they have access to us, which really helps us shape our policy agenda, which is ultimately the mission of the EDC, is to provide service to our members, help educate them, but also help advocate and be their voice in Albany.
So people can quite literally reach out to you and say, hey, I'm a small business. There's a policy that has been enacted and it's really disrupting my business. Can you help me?
Yeah, not only can they, but they do. They reach out pretty regularly. And one of the things that we've really tried to pride ourselves on as an organization is being accessible. There are so many things happening in New York State. It's such a big state. It's so diverse. You have the largest city in the country, and then you have the Adirondacks and lots of open rural green space. You have art communities, you have infrastructure. And so being able to have direct access to our members and them having access to us allows us to sort of learn about all these different things that are happening and helps us craft and shape policy at a statewide level that will help grow New York's economy, help our members serve their communities.
I really love the fact that you added in the fact that, yes, we have the largest city in the country, but there's so much rural area, greenery, nature here. And a lot of people who maybe are outside of New York State, and maybe they're listening in, they might not be fully aware of that.
Sure.
But it has and holds much economic power here in New York State.
Absolutely. I mean, outside of New York State, the perception sometimes is it's sidewalks and skyscrapers, right? And it is. New York City is the largest economic engine in the country. Once you get outside of New York City, you have a lot of smaller urban centers. You have a lot of post-industrial. You have a lot of manufacturing. You have a lot of nature. You have artist communities. It's such a diverse state, and even parts of the state that get labeled as upstate are so uniquely different. Buffalo versus Rochester, Syracuse versus Albany, and even the rural parts, the southern tier is very different than the North Country. So one of the things we really try to do is get out and visit our members in their communities, visit legislators in their communities to really get an understanding of what's happening on the ground, what are the priorities that they have, what's important to them to grow their economies in their community.
So at New York State Economic Development Council, you really have a holistic view of New York State and how to approach it and how to support people, from different, backgrounds.
Absolutely. We try to, and one of the things that we try to emphasize is when you create statewide policies, we hope that there's a level of flexibility so that each of the communities that it would impact can mobilize, operationalize a policy, a program, or an initiative that best fits their needs and their ability to grow their local economy. So when a new statewide program or policy gets introduced, we have an opportunity to really see how it's going to impact every part of the state. And it may not always be the exact same type of impact. So creating statewide policy can be a bit challenging when your state is big and diverse as New York, but there are certainly examples of programs that work across the state that have statewide impact. And we're proud to work with our partners in state government and our members on a lot of those.
Do you have any potential examples of, rural and urban environments kind of coming together in what you're talking about, and enacting new policies or having to deal with new policies that are coming out?
Sure. There are two programs that we've spent some time working on over the last couple of years that jump to mind. First is the Restore New York program, which is a municipal grant program that communities can apply to that help revitalize and or remove dilapidated or underutilized facilities in their community. So whether you're in Brooklyn, you're in Buffalo, or you're up in Canton, New York, every community has those buildings or facilities that are either vacant or underutilized, and every one of those communities can apply to this grant program. And there are countless examples of success stories all across New York State for that program. The other one is the Fast New York program, which is developing site infrastructure for industry attraction purposes. And whether it's a brownfield, which is an adaptive reuse project, or a greenfield project, communities can apply to this program and have over the last 5 years to build out infrastructure, reduce the time to market to help create sites that will attract industry investment into their communities.
Longtime New Yorkers will really understand the impact of this, because a lot of people who have been in New York State for a long time, from like the 80s on, know how much manufacturing was around during that time. And you're talking about, those kinds of buildings like the brownfields this would be an example of that.
Sure.
Becoming something that's utilized again instead of this dilapidated building.
Yeah. In a lot of communities, there's this adjustment from post-industrial economy, which really powered a lot of upstate and the economic strength that we've had. And manufacturing today, industry development looks very different than it did 25, 30 years ago. So how do we create those high-tech companies, those semiconductors, life sciences that are areas that New York, I think, has a real opportunity to be successful in? How do we attract those types of investments back to New York? And programs like Fast New York or Power Up are really positioned extremely well to help bridge the gap that may exist in bringing those companies here to New York and having them want to have a presence here.
Ryan, then what is your role when it comes to connecting those small businesses with those programs like Fast New York and everything? What does the economic...
Sure. I like to think of ourselves as a bit of a navigator, right? There's this sea of resources that are out there, and we may not have all the answers, and really we can't, just because it's such a big state, but we're able to connect individuals, businesses, and organizations to our members. They're the experts. They know the programs that they have in place at the local level. They understand the state investment programs that businesses can qualify for. They help really serve as the direct point. So when we get an inquiry from a small business, a medium-sized business, often our job is to hand them off to the folks that are the experts in driving project activity across New York State. We're more of the overarching entity that helps develop policies and programs that allow for our members to do the types of projects that we read about in the papers all the time.
Would you say that the Fast New York program and other programs like that are the core initiatives right now that New York State Economic Development Council is working on in order to help New York State become and continue to be a powerhouse in innovation and manufacturing and technology?
Yeah, it's hard to say that we have, here's our core focus, because we need to be focusing on a lot of different things in order to create an environment that's rich for economic activity, but also helps with our business competitiveness. Another thing that we spent some time working on were the manufacturing extension partnerships, which were dealing with some potential federal cuts. And to the credit of New York State and Empire State Development, they really stepped up and helped bridge that gap during some of the challenges that each of these manufacturing extension partnerships were facing from a financial standpoint. And those manufacturing extension partnerships really target small to medium-sized manufacturers, giving them tools and resources to grow their business, to modernize their manufacturing systems, and or launch new product lines. So we spend a lot of time focusing on that. And one of the things we're really focusing on is less about sort of what new programs can we introduce, because we have a lot of really great programs that work well here in New York State. How do we create a more competitive environment? Are there ways that we can cut red tape, reduce the regulatory burden that exists in certain types of industries? What are some of the things that we can do to streamline local, state, county level permitting to make the time to market much quicker and more competitive all across New York State? So we're focusing on that. Energy is a huge topic right now in New York State. Everybody that gets a utility bill, sees what's sort of happening there and recognize that we need to be investing in new energy all across the state, and are very proud that our members are playing a very active role on that.
Yeah, infrastructure is a big conversation point right now, especially the energy infrastructure. Do
Sure.
we have the ability to even power these data plants, even power Micron? So that must be a lot of what you guys are kind of talking about behind the scenes.
It's a lot of what we're talking about and focusing on, and trying to bring in experts who understand what's happening on the ground. And it's not just necessarily building new power facilities. It's how do you transmit power from one place to another? How do you store energy that gets generated in off-peak times? Battery storage is another key area that New York State is doing a lot of work in. So it's really helping educate folks, like, if these are our economic development goals, here are the things that we know we're going to need. And one of the things we know we're going to need is a significant amount of power.
You've done an excellent job of giving us a really good background of everything that New York State Economic Development Council is doing, just like as a basis background. But could you tell us, what do you think the biggest value that New York State Economic Development Council is bringing to New York State right now?
I think it's our ability to look at the big picture and understand how we need to be pragmatic in a time when there are certainly a lot of challenges we are facing in the political landscape that exists right now. So taking a look at policies and programs, looking at their fiscal impact, trying to do the things that we know our communities need in order to drive investment, workforce development, infrastructure, looking at it through a lens of sort of being apolitical and really focusing on data and information and the things that are out there that point us in a certain direction as far as we need to be focusing on this. And that sometimes it requires us being a little bit nimble. 3-4 years ago, power was an issue, but not as much of an issue as it is right now with the surge in data centers and new manufacturing that's coming online. So I think that's one of the things I pride myself and the organization on, is our ability to sort of see where things are heading and sort of adapt and try to be early on in the conversation around, here's what we really need to be focusing on if we want to create economic growth, we want to reverse outward migration here in New York, and we want to keep all these really awesome, young, talented people that we're educating here in New York and provide them with career opportunities.
Everything you just said is excellent because it really ties together a lot of what our episodes are about, which is, you know, really connecting the workforce to driving the innovation, to driving the needs of New York to kind of, it circles on itself, right?
It does.
You know, we need innovation in order to have technology be where it's at, but we need to innovate our, you know, infrastructure and our systems in order to get technology to move forward. And you have to have a workforce that's ready and willing to do all of those things and also
Sure.
capable of doing all of them.
Yeah, and they need to be able to access it, right?
Yeah.
Where do you go to find the information that you need about the types of opportunities that are out there? How do you connect the dots, which I know NYSTEC and IGNITEU do a tremendous job of, is, you know, connecting those dots, putting people together, and that's one of the things that we do in addition to the advocacy and the education is we provide forums and opportunities for our economic development leaders to work with and learn from each other through our various conferences and events that we host and that we put together. And it is really very circular, as you kind of put it. You need to have a trained workforce, you need to be attracting jobs, you need to be developing downtown communities, you need to be building new housing, you need to be doing all of these things to create an environment that's drives economic activity and growth in New York State. And that looks different in every community that we serve.
It's like the Pac-Man, right? Always just munching through. Huh?
Always moving from one thing to another. Which is, it's great. Every day looks a little bit different.
Yeah.
And it keeps things refreshing and new and fun in the role that we play because you're able to see progress. You look at what impact Micron's going to have in central New York. You look back to what Global Foundries did here in the capital region 15 years ago, the development that's happening over at New York Creates. Those are really game-changing opportunities for New York State and puts us on the map globally and helps bring new investment and new opportunities into New York.
Which is honestly quite impressive because New York is already on the map globally.
Correct.
So for you to say something like that is really impactful, the work that's being done here.
It is, and one of the things we're seeing is that, you know, other states are adapting and growing. So how do we, competing against other states, create an environment that not only rivals what they're doing, but helps folks understand the opportunities that exist here in New York? And a lot of that is very much connecting the dots, bringing local community, state leaders together and helping them create projects out of different programs and initiatives that are happening across the state and helping people access them. That's one of the major things that I think we do a really good job of.
Yeah. So you've kind of hit on it a little bit, well, actually quite a bit throughout this conversation. You know, we've talked about a variety of different programs and initiatives and everything that, you know, is happening within the state that you guys are supporting. But what kinds of initiatives would you say that New York State Economic Development Council is championing right now to really support business growth and economic development across the state?
Yeah, we, over the past year or so, have worked on an initiative with about 40 other associations. It's called a Blueprint for Change, and it sort of looks at, you know, where New York fits in from the standpoint of competitiveness. And there's a sort of a couple of key priorities that we had been championing over the last 6 to 9 months, and we're excited to sort of see starting to be talked about. Some of that is looking at, you know, our energy and the CLCPA, which is the Climate Leadership Protection Act. Do we need to adapt some of our timelines and our goals to remain competitive while also managing the cost of energy in New York State? The regulatory reform, I think, is a big one. You know, the research that we were able to do showed that New York is second to only California when it comes to regulations. There are 300,000 regulations on the books, 18.4 million words in our regulatory code, which can be a lot to navigate. And one of the things that we are excited about is the idea of utilizing AI to help perhaps reduce some of the regulatory burden, look at some of the things that are outdated. We're really excited that the governor has taken this on with looking at regulations that need to be either modernized or reformed a little bit. SEEKR, which is the Environmental Quality Review Act, celebrating its 50th anniversary. It hasn't really changed much in 50 years, so are there ways to modernize and streamline that process while at the same time making sure we protect our climate and our environment here in New York State?
It's a double-edged sword, huh?
It can be, but I think there's a way to find balance, and there's always a way to balance the economic needs with our environmental needs, and I think that's one of the things we're actively pursuing right now is how do we strike that right balance.
Right. And always taking influence from other people who have maybe done it before, even in other states and other countries maybe, and that's a lot of what we're seeing right now with manufacturing coming up in New York is we've really learned a lot from a lot of people.
Sure.
We're inputting that knowledge and we're twisting it in a way that will benefit New York State.
Absolutely. We want to attract the industries of the future because that's what's going to keep our young talent here, providing them with career pathways and opportunities. So what are the things that those industries are going to need to be successful here? They're going to need sites that are ready. They're going to need access to energy. They're going to need housing. They're going to need housing for their workforce. So all those things sort of tie into each other, and what are the things that we need to do in order to accomplish those goals. And some of the things that we were able to identify is modernizing and reducing some of the regulatory red tape that exists in New York. So that's been a lot of our focus. Again, we're working on the manufacturing extension partnerships and sort of how do we utilize and leverage the academic resources that we have here in New York State with research and development that's happening at any one of the SUNY institutions, any of our private colleges, because those ultimately are going to lead to the industries of tomorrow, whether it's in artificial intelligence, whether it's in quantum computing, whether it's in semiconductors, life sciences. We're really doing that research at the ground level, and it's nice that a lot of that research is being recognized at the federal level. There's a lot of federal investment pouring into New York State at a number of institutions across the entire state right now.
Yeah, that is really good to hear for a number of reasons. And one of those reasons is because, we do need those institutions in order to do the research, in order to get a good background and make informed decisions. So that's really great to honestly hear that we're getting federal initiative from that as well.
We are, in the states matching it, the private sector is investing in it, and when you have sort of the four-legged stool approach of public sector, private sector, academic sector, non-for-profit sector, investing into an initiative or an industry, you're going to get better outcomes because everybody's at the table, everybody's engaged in the same goal and the same work.
Now you've mentioned a number of partners and organizations that you work with in order to develop all of these things and to work on all these policies and initiatives and programs. Do you have any examples of these relationships kind of panning out and creating good economic, impact in different areas?
Sure. We work with, 65 to 70 different organizations on our semiconductor industry attraction work. And so we coordinate with the state, with the local economic developers to go out and promote the great things that are happening in the semiconductor industry here in New York State. And in doing so, we're able to attract new investment into New York State and hopefully bring supply chain to Micron and Global Foundries and some of the investment that we're seeing in the semiconductor industry across upstate New York. I talked a little bit about the Blueprint Initiative, where we worked with other associations and organizations across the state to really develop a series of recommendations that are going to improve our business competitiveness and our economic competitiveness across the state. There's a handful of other smaller examples of things that we've been able to do. We're right now working on how do we provide more tools and resources to support childcare in New York State, and is there a role that our members can play to help bring new childcare facilities and opportunities into the markets across New York State as well. So there's really, this perception of economic development being solely about job creation has really changed and evolved, and we need to think more broadly about economic development as supporting a higher quality of life and creating new economic wealth, health, and prosperity.
Ryan, that's really great to hear all that information, and I'm curious though, what is New York State Economic Development Council doing to support its members currently with these big changes that are kind of coming in manufacturing and innovation and technology here in New York State?
Sure. Well, one of the things that we are doing is we're being their voice here in Albany. Right now, it's budget season in New York, so we're navigating the budget process, and there are a number of initiatives that are being talked about and potentially being introduced that we are making sure that our members' voices are heard and are a part of that conversation. So as we're talking about regulatory reform, what are some of those regulations that we need to be taking a look at? If we're talking about economic development investment programs, what are the programs that are really working, and making sure that we're funding those programs at an adequate level that will allow for the types of projects that need to be happening in New York State to continue to happen, because ultimately our members are the ones that are sort of driving that activity at the local level.
So when you talk about the funding aspect of things, do you have direct communications with state entities that are kind of, it's not like you're telling them this amount of money needs to go here or there, but are you having conversations with them about this is the money flow that would be beneficial to this project, this area, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have those conversations throughout the year with our partners in state government, whether it's in the legislature, in the executive branch, with the various state agencies. We sort of serve as a line of communication directly to them, whether it's the Division of Budget. We're talking to them pretty regularly, and one of the things we want to make sure we do when we're having those conversations is point to examples and case studies in their own communities that say, when you invest in site development, here's what happens. A great example of that is the Fast New York program, invested in energy infrastructure site development, led to Fairlife, which is one of the largest projects that is coming near completion in the Rochester area, and it leverages an industry that New York is already very successful in, which is our dairy industry. We have some of the best dairy farms in the entire world, so how do we utilize certain economic development tools to support those industries for growth? And Fairlife is one example. Chobani, Faye yogurt, there's Belgioso, Kraft cheese. There's a whole industry around dairy that is being supported by some of the different types of programs that we've actively been advocating for and pushing for as part of New York's policy agenda. And it continues to be a conversation every year during the budget.
I just love the fact that you keep bringing up, the more rural aspects of New York State, because a lot of people really skip over that. They really don't understand that, New York State is more than just a concrete jungle. Thank you, Alicia Keys.
Yeah.
But it is really this large environment of farming and production in that kind of way, especially on the dairy side. And it makes me really excited when I hear people saying, we're funding that, we're putting money into that, because it is such a large industry here, and people don't know that.
Yeah, and what's nice about some of the programs is it can be utilized to support dairy in one community or wineries in another part of the state, which ties into the agricultural economy. Cannabis is an industry that's growing rapidly here in New York State. So how do we take a program like a Fast New York and show that it's impacting semiconductors, agriculture, life sciences? And the more we can point to those examples of success, the more likelihood we will have of continuing to see support from it for those programs from New York State.
It's great to have heard, the different kinds of solutions that are currently being presented.
Sure.
Not just for the dairy industry, but also for manufacturing and other areas of, advanced technologies here in New York State that we're really trying to push forward in terms of a workforce.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you, what kind of workforce challenges beyond, some of the things that we've kind of talked about and touched on a little bit right now, have you seen? And what is New York State Economic Development Council doing to kind of amend or bridge, as you like to say, those problems to solutions?
Sure. One of the things that we identified in the blueprint is just there's a plethora of workforce development resources scattered throughout New York State, whether that's happening at the higher education level, whether it's happening with the community colleges, whether it's happening with direct certification trainings that are happening, but there isn't really a way to navigate and understand, here are all the different tools and resources that are out there. So one of the recommendations that was outlined in the blueprint was creating an ecosystem map of all the tools to support workforce development. So if you're looking to train engineers, here's all the different programs that are out there. How do you sort of plug and play and connect the dots to the companies, the businesses that ultimately need certain types of workers? So that's one area where we see an opportunity coming up, is how do we develop a map and an ecosystem to help people navigate all the tools, the really great tools that are out there.
That's pretty cool. I am excited about that project.
Yeah, and it's interesting, we have a little bit of a track record having done this with a different industry, which was semiconductors. So, about 4 or 5 years ago, we knew we were seeing tremendous growth in the semiconductor industry, but we didn't really have a way to map out, here's all the different things that are happening, but here's all the different tools and resources. So we worked with our partners in state government to develop a semiconductor asset map a couple of years ago. We're actually going through a process, hopefully in the near future, of updating that map and the assets and the tools and resources that we have to support the semiconductor industry. And we really learned there's so much out there that we weren't even aware of that was happening. So the more we can inform and educate people that are in the industry, but also inform and educate legislators and lawmakers about, here's the real impact that this industry is having. And it may not have to be semiconductors, it could be dairy, it could be life sciences, it could be AI, how those industries are driving economic growth across New York State. They're creating and broadening our tax base, which is ultimately, one of the main goals of economic development, is how do we continue to broaden and grow our tax base here in New York State.
Grow that, it's that institutional wealth, that historical wealth in families and in small businesses across New York State. That's such a great goal to have.
Sure, it really is, and there's so many different ways that we can play a role, and we hope to continue to play a role by connecting the dots and informing and educating and advocating for the policies and the programs that we're hearing from our members every day that they know they need to drive growth in their communities.
Yeah, everything that you've said then, I like how you're tying it all together for us, making it make sense, have a clear line of understanding.
Sure.
You don't believe that. You're like, I don't know if I've done that.
I'm trying.
I will say you've done a great job of it. What do you think is, a key finding that showcases the importance of working these different kinds of institutions together, from academia to state organizations, state entities, to actual private institutions and private industry. What is the benefit, the key part of connecting all of those dots?
The key part of connecting all those dots is ultimately you lead to progress and growth, right? You see a community sort of grow and evolve. You sort of start to see a changing dynamic on the ground in the communities that our members are serving. You're seeing the revitalization of neighborhoods and downtowns. You're seeing a reduction in blight. Every community, whether you're in New York State or anywhere around the country, deals with issues of blight or a building or a facility that's not utilized most effectively or most efficiently. So how do we identify the programs that we know need to happen? And that requires bringing multiple stakeholders to the table. And when you have multiple stakeholders at the table, everybody feels like they're a part of the change and the growth that is happening in their community. So when everybody has buy-in, it leads to much better outcomes and opportunities for the residents and the communities that each of our members serve.
We've talked about a number of institutions and state entities or whatever that, New York State Economic Development Council partners with in order to create this cohesion in New York State for economic growth and development. But where do you see things like incubators, accelerators, falling into the workforce talent pipeline development?
They're a critically important part of a successful and thriving ecosystem. I mean, the building we're in right now with the makerspace downstairs is just a great example of that. When you have tools and resources where people can go to learn and grow, while at the same time, hopefully getting their business off the ground, providing them with access to tools and equipment that, a lot of small businesses just don't have the resources to necessarily have access to or utilize, I think is important. And, there's an association, the BIANIS for short, the Business Incubator Association of New York State, that really advocates for and supports them, which we work alongside of. So there's no shortage of industries, associations out there that we partner with, right? We're not the experts on it. They are. So how do we leverage our collective knowledge and wealth with theirs and advocate for things that are going to support the growth that's happening in that part of the ecosystem? They play a very important role.
And so now that we've kind of talked about all these different elements of New York State and building its economic base, what do you think we should be looking out for in terms of results from all of the initiatives that are coming out, and how can we make those identifiable to people where they say, oh, yes, this is creating the kind of impact we were hoping to get out of it?
Sure. It's interesting. Economic development at times is more of an art form than it is a science. So, if it was a science, everybody would do it the exact same way, and every community does it a little bit differently. Every state does it a little bit differently. Quality of life is sort of that sometimes forgotten metric. So when people have access to good jobs, they live in a community that's affordable to them. They have opportunities to grow their own personal wealth. When you see new businesses coming into an area where you see our population dynamics start to change and start to grow, those are the kinds of things that we're looking for as indicators when we see new investment coming back into New York State, broadening our tax base. There's so many different things that we have to look at and sort of take into consideration. So it's hard to point to just one specific thing, but I think the population metric is one that we kind of look at closely. New York State has lost population for a number of years. What are the things that we can do to change that trajectory and change that dynamic? And one of the things we can do is create thriving communities that attract talent and retain talent because they have a good job, because they have access to good housing, and they have access to growth opportunities in their own personal and professional careers. They can grow their own wealth. whether that's through entrepreneurship, whether that's through a job at a large manufacturer or anything like that.
Great. I love that answer, honestly. But on the fun side of things, where are we at with getting New York to a warmer climate?
I don't know that there's much we can do when it's snowing out on April 7th. We can control a lot of things. Nature is one of the things we certainly can't control. But
we love it here, too.
One of the things that we always try to highlight is you get to experience every season in New York. And there's an opportunity, I think, for New York State as a climate refuge. As we see our environment evolving and changing rapidly. What are ways that we can position ourselves, to insulate from potential natural disasters that other states, other parts of the country have to deal with. So, just because it's snowing isn't a bad thing. People like to ski. There's a lot of fun things to do in New York in the wintertime.
And if you like maple syrup, you got to have the snow. Otherwise, it's not going to come.
Absolutely. I actually was just down in the southern tier, and one of my colleagues actually makes his own maple syrup,
and
it's peak season right now
it is
for
right
him.
Now, yes.
So I was like, listen, just bring a couple of jars the next time you're in Albany, because there's nothing quite like New York State maple syrup. Vermont's pretty good.
Vermont's pretty good.
I like the maple syrup we have here in New York State.
New York is it's a unique flavor, and it's so good. It's so good. So if you can get your hands on some New York State maple syrup, definitely do it. I've loved our conversation so far. You've been very insightful with everything that you've provided us informationally here. I'm very grateful of that. But I want to know if there's any kind of tip or advice or just a piece of knowledge that you'd love to leave economic leaders or small business founders here in New York State.
Yeah, to the small business founders, there's endless tools and resources that you can utilize to grow your business and be successful here in New York State, whether you're at that early incubation phase, the small to medium-sized business, and you're looking to expand and grow. I'd advise and I'd say to you, reach out to your local economic development partners and organizations, whether it's Empire State Development at the state level, which has regional offices, or it's your local industrial development agency, your local development corporation. They can help you navigate the tools in your own community and backyard to help support your growth here. And to economic development leaders across the state, I would say continue to do the hard work that needs to be done, and recognize that it takes a lifetime of work to become an overnight success. Every little bit of work you do throughout your tenure, your career, ultimately will lead to better outcomes. So utilize all the partners you have in your community, in the private sector, the public sector, the non-for-profit sector, the academic sector, and reach out to your peers and colleagues. We're not all competing against each other. We all have the same common goal of making our communities more vibrant and more economically successful. So utilize your own networks within your communities and around the state to support the growth that you need to see happen in your community.
How truly motivational. I feel motivated now.
All right.
I'm ready. I'm going to call
Who you're calling? You're calling everybody.
Hey, how are you doing economically? Let's talk about it.
Yeah, do you know who I am? Here's who we are. Here's what we do. Tell your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, whether you're an economic development organization or whether you're part of the ecosystem, tell your story.
Yeah.
Talk about the work that you're doing, connect with individuals, connect with different leaders in the economic development ecosystem so that they're aware of the great work that you're doing.
Ryan, on a personal note, I want to know, what is it that you are most excited about for the future of New York State?
Wow, that's a question that could go in so many different directions. I'm really excited about the innovation economy here in New York. I think whether it's quantum, whether it's the life sciences, whether it's semiconductors, even the innovation that's happening in our agricultural economy is really, really exciting to me, because I think we have endless potential and opportunities. And what excites me is that we have, I think right now, partners in government that are willing to work with us to address our economic competitiveness and the business climate to make it more successful, more business friendly, and to help people access the tools and resources they need. So I think it's just where the innovation is happening around so many of the key industries that's most exciting to me.
Our listeners, if they wanted to connect with you, Ryan,
Sure.
How could they do that?
Yeah, you can visit us on our website at www.nysedc.org. All of my contact information is right up on the website. You can feel free to reach out to me. We're on basically every social media platform, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, not called Twitter anymore, now called X. You can follow us and see the work that not only we're doing, but our members are doing. We always like to promote the great things that are happening here in New York State. So feel free to reach out to us, but also feel free to follow us if you're interested in the economic development work that's happening here across New York State.
Thank you all again for listening in on this very insightful episode of the IGNITEU New York podcast powered by NYSTEC. I'm your host, Shay Brown. Make sure you like, follow, and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Ooh.